morning. Thanks for attending here today. There's two reasons why I've asked you to come here this morning. Firstly, I'd like to speak to you in relation to cold case investigations generally. And secondly, we'd like to update you on homicide number 48 for 1990. I can assure you that a great deal of time and resources are spent on the investigation of all homicides in an effort to identify those responsible and to ensure that our efforts will withstand all judicial scrutiny. These cases, as in all homicide cases, receive a full and comprehensive investigation by the members of my unit during this preliminary and initial investigative stage. If a homicide investigation has not been resolved during the initial investigation, after 3 years it's reassigned to the cold case section, who will follow up on the case and investigate any new leads or tips that come in as it relates or that are relevant to that particular homicide investigation. Due to the fact that the cases are so extensively investigated, documented, and evidence preserved during the initial investigation, this enables us to move forward on investigations years later with success. In order to become more effective in the manner in which we follow up on cold cases, an internal review was conducted on our cold case unit. As a result of this review, we initiated Project Never Give Up. Our intention is to take advantage of advancements in technology that may reinvigorate a case and shed light on the person or persons that are responsible for the homicide. As you may be aware, there have been many advances in DNA and fingerprint technology over the years since these crimes were committed. We have to methodically go through the cases and look at the evidence that was collected during the initial investigation to determine if further examinations or testing would benefit that particular investigation. Not every case has evidence that can be re-examined. In some cases, there's no evidence that can be tested. In other cases, we may find that the sample has been degraded through the passage of time, or the collection method that was utilized was inappropriate and not sufficient to preserve the sample. Before DNA, we did not preserve samples in the same manner that we do now, because we did not have a full understanding or comprehend where technology and where DNA would advance us in the future. Our intent is to move forward one case at a time in an effort to identify those responsible and hold them accountable, no matter how long it takes. In addition, our cold case website is currently being updated. This is to take advantage of new technology and to be compatible with the plethora of devices that are available in today's marketplace. We hope to release this website to the public in the near future to assist us in attracting new information on our cold case investigations. Now, I'd like to introduce you the officer in charge of my cold case units, Detective Sergeant Stacy Gallant. He's going to update you in relation to homicide number 48 for 1990. This is one of the first cold cases that were reviewed under this initiative. So I'll turn it over to Stacy, and he can give you the particulars as it relates to that investigation.
Thank you and good morning. The following are the circumstances surrounding the murder of Surinder Singh Parmar. Mr. Parmar was 38 years old at the time of his death. On Monday, November 19th, 1990, 25 years ago, almost to the day, at 1:15 a.m., the deceased was found in the men's washroom of a building situated on the gas bar lot called the Penny Gas Bar at 1039 Danforth Road in Scarborough. The deceased had been stabbed. The motive for the murder appeared to be robbery. It appears a very violent struggle took place in the confines of a small bathroom located at this gas bar. The deceased was the night shift attendant for the gas bar. He began his work at 11 o'clock on the prior Sunday night, and the body was discovered by a customer who had stopped for gas after work. She went to the gas station and purchased gas and found that the attendant was not in the kiosk and went and checked the bathroom and subsequently called the police. The washroom was located some 30 meters away from the kiosk where one would normally pay for gas. Back in 1990, the gas business was a mainly cash business. We did not use pay at the pump back in the time, so it was mainly a cash business back then. Members of 41 Division and Criminal Investigation Bureau attended and began the initial investigation. At the time, Detective Sergeant James Crowley and Detective Chris Wilson of the Homicide Squad attended the scene and took charge of the homicide investigation. Both of these investigators have since retired from the Toronto Police. An autopsy was performed on November 19, 1990. The cause of death was determined to be multiple stab wounds. The deceased entered Canada on June 11, 1990 from India on a visitor's pass. He was residing with a relative at the time of his death and planned on returning to India in January of the next year. Surinder Singh Parmar left a widow, a daughter, 12 years old at the time, and a son, 6 years old at the time. They were still residing in India. Mr. Parmar was a headmaster and school teacher in India and had completed his PhD in history. He came from India to explore Canada as a place to live with his family. While he was here, he took a job at the gas station to pass time and to have some extra spending money. He did not like to be an idle man. His wife and children had to travel to Canada for the funeral. They settled in Ontario after the funeral. His children, now 25 years later, are grown-up, hard-working members of this community. They continued to wonder about what had happened to their father. They were shocked when we called them a few weeks ago to give them an update on the investigation after all these years, having no contact. A number of months ago, Detective Henry Marsman of the Cold Case Unit was assigned this investigation. A review of the evidence in this case was conducted and certain investigative steps were taken certain investigative steps were taken in regards to evidence that was located at the time of the original investigation. In conjunction with members of our Forensic Identification Unit and the Center of Forensic Sciences, items were re-examined. This is evidence that had been sitting in case boxes on a shelf for years, just waiting for its turn. As this case is still under investigation now and before the courts, as you know, I cannot give you further details about the evidence. As a result of those examinations, the accused was identified and arrested yesterday morning. The accused, Rupert Richards, is now 61 years of age. At the time of the offense, he would have been 36 years old. Richards is not in the workforce. He was unemployed. Richards was arrested outside his home in the west end of Toronto, where he resided alone. He was taken into custody without incident and transported to 41 Division. Yesterday afternoon, he made his first court appearance at Scarborough Courts on the charge of first-degree murder. We have since been in contact with the family, and they expressed their gratitude that arrest was finally made after all this time. The victim's children were very young at the time of their father's death. To go 25 years without knowing who did this to their father was very difficult for them to cope with. The family has requested privacy, and they respectfully do not wish to speak to the media at this time. If you have any questions, we'd be glad to answer those.
Was the suspect known to police in any other way?
He was known to police. We've had contact with him on several occasions. So yes, he was known to police.
How? Yeah, can you elaborate on how you were contacted?
He'd been arrested in the past, and he'd been investigated in the past by the police for various occurrences at his place of residence, noise complaints, things like that.
Violence?
He had been investigated for domestic violence in the past, yes.
Was he ever a suspect in this case?
No, he was not.
So can you just elaborate on what was it that broke this case open for you?
Well, again, it's forensic evidence. I can't go into the specifics of what that forensic evidence is because it's before the courts, but you can tell there are a number of different types of forensic evidence that we use. We spoke about the examination in these cases. We're looking at DNA and fingerprint evidence. Those both played a part in this case.
DNA and fingerprint evidence from Mr. Rupert?
From the crime scene, yes.
So during his previous interactions with police, the numerous times that you've investigated him, would fingerprints and DNA have been collected then? Or is that how it kind of?
Not every time we have an interaction with anybody do we take fingerprints or DNA. It's only on certain occasions where we're allowed to take DNA, and the same with fingerprints. I can't go into, again, the specifics about how or why we have those at this point, but I can say that forensic examinations did lead to the arrest of Mr. Richards.
But you can say that you had his DNA on file from a previous contact you
No.
had with police?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay, let's go back to this robbery. Can you give us an idea of what was taken?
The robbery was for cash. It was a very small amount of cash in terms of the day. I won't release the exact amount, but it was a small amount of cash.
If there was a robbery, how did they end up in the bathroom of the gas station?
Unfortunately, we don't have any surveillance video back from this time, and Mr. Parmar was a sole employee of the location. That was the only bathroom for employees or customers to use. So it would be speculation to say how it ended up back there.
But there was no indication of a struggle that started at a gas bar and then ended with Mr. Parmar's body being left in the bathroom. You think that he was killed in the bathroom?
Yes, he was killed in the bathroom, yes.
Was Mr. Richards ever a suspect, like at the onset, right after the murder?
No, he was not.
Can you comment on his reaction when being arrested 25 years after the fact when he was given an accident?
I would say he was surprised to see us there from Homicide. Again, he'd had previous interactions with the police, but when we showed up and identified ourselves as where we were from, I think he was quite surprised to see us.
Were the interactions with police before the murder or after the murder?
After the murder.
Can you talk a little bit more too about, I know you mentioned that they were surprised, but what the victim's family, a little bit more about what those conversations were like, both when you updated them a few weeks ago and with news of the arrest?
Yes, we had the son and daughter come in to see us to give them a preliminary update that we were investigating the case, and being their ages now, back when this originally happened, they were 6 and 12 years old. You can imagine they would have had no information from their family and relatives at that age. Pretty much they said they were left in the dark back then because, you know, you don't really discuss those type of things with a 6-year-old or a 12-year-old about the circumstances. So over the years, they had minimal information given to them about the investigation and where it was left. When they came in, they were very, very surprised to, first of all, have heard from us that we were calling them in, and second of all, that the case was actually still under investigation. They were very happy that it was, but at the same time, they were in a state of disbelief, I think, that after all these years, there could possibly be a resolution. And yesterday, when we contacted them to tell them that an arrest was made, again, they were very grateful, very happy that we did pursue it and that we did make an arrest in the case. But I think it brings back for them old memories of what it was like back then for them when they first initially found out their father had been murdered in Toronto. And so I think it really stirs up a lot of emotions for the family. And I think it's hard for them to cope with it, and that's why right now they are respectfully requesting some privacy at this time.
Is there one still around?
Yes. Mother and the 2 children live in the GTA.
Or for the staff inspector, sir, you said this was one of the first ones we reviewed. Can we expect to see you guys doing this more frequently now?
Well, this is part of the initiative, is to, as I say, methodically go through our old case boxes. It's very time-consuming. We don't want to miss anything. And we want to make sure that we identify the right cases where the samples exist, that we can further our investigations, whether it be through DNA examination or through the new fingerprint technology now that we now are utilizing and has been successful in other investigations before today. So yeah, it'll take some time, but we're going to keep moving forward.
In this case, the information that led to the arrest, ultimately, either of you can answer this one. Was it a matter of re-examining things that had already been examined, or was it performing new tests that maybe weren't available in 1990?
It's a little bit of both. Re-examining evidence that we had collected and preserved back at the time of the original investigation, and with new technology, things that didn't exist back in 1990, we were able to apply new testing techniques, and it helped in both areas. New tests on old evidence and basically new things that were not around back in 1990. DNA wasn't around back in 1990 for us to really utilize in this fashion.
I don't, you probably, it's tough to get into this, but what led you to, you know, the accused? Because you have the DNA from the scene, but you need to run the DNA on the accused, you know, to find a match. Can you talk about what led to, you know, doing that test and matching it with Richards?
Well, when we speak of DNA, don't forget that we have victims' DNA as well, and that is a primary person that we would have had DNA from to confirm that is, in fact, his DNA that was there. I can't go into the investigative steps that we took to determine that it was, in fact, Mr. Richards, but it was a number of steps that led us there, and unfortunately, due to the investigation being before the courts now, I really can't get into that.
Can you talk about the accused's life or lifestyle at the time of the murder? Was he employed at that time? What was he like?
I don't know the details back 25 years ago on his employment status or what he was doing. And again, I can't really go into too much of his background. He's before the courts now, and I assume that will come out during the course of a trial or a preliminary hearing.
How long ago did this review start on this case?
On this case in particular, we started the review in August of this year.
So Richards thought he got away with it. There's lots of other people in the cold case who maybe think they got away with it.
That's right, and that's, you know, what we're looking at here is we have cases in the cold case unit that we actually have DNA profiles that link them to a crime. We have their DNA, we know who it is, except we don't have the name. Their DNA tells us who it is. We have a number of cases like that we're looking for the public to come forward and say, I know something about that case, I know who may be responsible. We can then go out and obtain DNA samples from those people and hopefully link it to another case. That evidence is there, we have it, and it's just waiting for a name.
Any more questions?
The website, you mentioned the website. When is that supposed to be revamped and changed the website?
Yeah, it takes a great deal of effort to put it all together to make the website complete. We don't want to put it out unless it's as complete as we can get it. It's going to involve a lot of photographs. There's going to be some details of the investigation that are on there. That stuff's already been put together and ready for release, but there's a number of things that we have to do in order to ensure that it's complete before we put it out.
And you'll be able to, I guess, have an option to provide a tip, I guess? Is that something that will be part of it as well?
That's in the works. The whole thought process behind the website is, one, to ensure that loved ones of people that are victimized by homicides know that we have not forgotten about their particular case. To also attract or cultivate information from members of the public to say, geez, that one's not solved yet. I have some information that might put them in the right direction. And as Detective Sergeant Gallant has said, we do have profiles, crime scene profiles of people. We just don't know what name to put to it. So all we need is that one little piece of information that we're missing in order to make the investigation go in a complete circle so we can prosecute these people. So we'll determine what's significant and what's not. People may have information and they may not think it's significant, but it may be very, very, very helpful in the investigation. So we're hoping that in the absence of a website, anybody that has any information on a historical or current homicide investigation to contact us, and there's many ways in which you can do that, but we're hoping that we can move forward on some of these older cases.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes today's conference.